The following podcast is an enticing media production.
Where the Nell have you been? Join us for conversation about life, business, and everything in between. Welcome to What the Nell, where we've got stories to tell. Here's your host, Nell Tice.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another brand new episode of the What the Nell podcast, the EcoPreneur's Edge edition, where I welcome my guest co-host, Mikee Bentz, Mikee with two E's. And today we have a very lovely guest with us, Kevin Long from Harrisburg. And Kevin is very proficient in the world of eco-justice in the community of Harrisburg. Kevin grew up in Northwest Ohio, actually, but received degrees from Miami University in Oxford, where he met his wife, Jennifer. He is retired from a 20-year career in cybersecurity. This is so interesting. You're the third person in cybersecurity I've connected with in the past week. It's crazy. He has received his MD from Lancaster Theological Seminary in 2022, lives in Harrisburg with Jennifer and their daughter. His faith has led to a passion for ecological justice, as well as a call to begin a new worshiping community, which we'll definitely get into. He has since founded Intertwined, which offers a space for unchurched, dechurched, and those who encounter the divine most easily outdoors, and to explore faith through the lens of ecology. So welcome, Mikee, again, and welcome, Kevin, to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So, I have to wonder, what your journey, how did you end up here and what led you to where you are today?
Oh boy. I've had a growing concern about ecological justice over a period of quite a while, and that extends well back into my career in cybersecurity. I've also been involved in faith communities, Christian faith communities throughout my life, and generally had good experiences. I'm what you'd call a churched person, and went through a transformation in 2018. Early that year, I had one of those middle of the night wrestling matches where I was being told that something different was in the cards for me. I had a great career in cybersecurity. I really loved my team, loved working downtown in Harrisburg, but after this, this wrestling, the mission I was left with was you need to do something different. You need to go to seminary. I didn't really have a clear idea of where that was going to lead. I just knew that I needed to be better equipped for whatever was coming next. I'd always been involved in church. I'd taught Sunday school and did different things, but never in any sort of official capacity. And so I enrolled in Lancaster Theological Seminary. They have a weekend program, so I was able to continue working my cybersecurity job for most of the time that I was in seminary in that 4-year program. And then in the middle of that time, going through seminary, COVID hit. There are all sorts of things going on in those years, 2018 to 2022, but had another one of those middle of the night wrestling matches. I had assumed that I would just become ordained, become a pastor in the Presbyterian Church, and that was what my future would hold. And after this middle of the night wrestling match that was no longer in the cards, I felt called to create a non-traditional faith community for people like you said, who are unchurched, dechurched, encounter the divine more easily outdoors. And that's what led to the founding of Intertwine. So we really have an ecological focus, ecological justice plays into that. And my role, thankfully, the ministry is supported by the local Presbyterian churches, and it enables me to also incorporate public witness and activism into my role as a pastor. So I hope that answers your question.
It sure does. It sure does. It's interesting how I would love to know how the passion for environmentalism and ecology has come into it, and how you decided to intertwine, for lack of a better term, the two.
Okay. And that name Intertwined refers to that. It's we're intertwined with one another. We're intertwined with the divine, and we're intertwined with the rest of creation. You can't neglect or harm one part of creation without it eventually impacting you. And we see that more and more with the increasing intensity of the climate catastrophe. Um, Unfortunately, through a lot of its history and through, a certain reading of scripture, a certain standpoint, the church has not always been on the right side of history when it comes to environmental defense. And unfortunately, we see that more and more with this extractive economy that we're married to, this late stage capitalism and the harm that it's doing to the environment. So at Intertwined, we're trying to counter that dominant narrative about where Christianity stands in regards to the environment and in regards to justice. Too often, the church has been silent at best on the issue of climate justice or even harmful. And so we're trying to counter that dominant narrative along with some of the other narratives that go along with Christianity in America. We're saying, no, we don't really feel that way about, this population, justice. We try to I don't often refer to us as Christians as often as referring to the folks who are part of Intertwined as Jesus followers. There's so much baggage around that term Christian these days, and the idea of what it means to follow Jesus seems a lot more clear. So when we look at the gospel, it was like Jesus took care of sick people, took everybody under his wing. He always led with healing. He did not ask people whether they had a job or, where they stood on theology before he provided healing to them. And so we just try to follow that model.
I love that. I love that so much. Mikee, we've had a lot of conversations on this podcast about all things environmentalism, but, we've never really talked about environmentalism and faith. I would love to know where you stand on this topic and what questions you might have for Kevin, because, this is uncharted territory for us. And it's a big one. It's a big topic.
It is almost one of the biggest topics. So I know that in season 1, we covered kind of my the things that I like to coach to on the Wheel of Life. So if you haven't heard that episode, go back and listen to all of season 1 and the first part of season 2. But I kind of separate life into a couple of different facets that I truly believe are important: physical health, mental health, emotional health, financial health, career health. The one that I think I struggled with a lot in my life and is one of the most important, but the one that I feel least qualified to guide anyone, is spiritual health. So I'm so honored to have you, Kevin, be a part of this journey and this story on EcoPreneur's Edge. Because I spent a lot of my life wrestling with the theology of Christianity, and I spent a lot of my life studying different religions and kind of seeing what things really made me feel like the divine was in my life and what things that I could leave behind. So now I have a great relationship with, what I call the divine. My spirituality is very strong. I can always connect with a higher power if I need to. But I find that when I'm coaching a lot of the people in my life, when I'm performing services in my salon, and even trying to guide a spiritual conversation in my dance studio, I don't necessarily see the hunger or the yearning in those people that I know that I have for the spirituality and the divine. And then being Mikee with 2 E's, my 2 E's stand for the environment and everyone, the 2 things that I care about the most, it's very hard for me to get people interested in spirituality, let alone tying it into my mission of environmental friendliness. So with that long caveat, how would you, number one, help me guide other people into a, faith-based, spiritual, eco-friendly life? And, what tips or tools do you have that, could keep us sustainably spiritual? I want people to be interested in spirituality, but I want people to keep coming back to that notion in their life, no matter what it looks like, when we're stereotyping things.
I think people have to find the need in themselves for that spiritual life, and there are a lot of things working against us. people who come to me generally already have that spiritual need. People, they hear about Intertwined and they're like, oh, this might be the thing. That Intertwined by design doesn't have a building. When the weather permits, our gatherings are always outdoors. April through October, we meet on City Island on Sunday afternoons. And for some people, that's the thing. It's like they come, they sit, we do some centering, some reading, some fellowship, and that really meets their needs. I think for a lot of people, they don't realize they have that need, and it's kind of hard to convince them. So part of my message is that, you know, go outdoors. There's, I always say if there was an admission fee for hiking the area hiking trails, more people would go because they associate value with the price tag for things. I have a friend who likes to be outdoors, and we were down at Disney World together with our families, and we were leaving Disney World after the fireworks. And it's just mobs of people. You're just tightly packed in, and you've spent who knows how much money for, you know, unhealthy food over the course of the day, and you're exhausted and you're just trying to get back to the undersized room where you'll be trying to sleep that night. And I looked over at my friend and I said, you know what I like? I like the woods. You just you can just go to the woods for free. And I'm serious. I think if there was a price tag attached, there would be lines of people. You'd have to get a fast pass in order to bypass that and go up and, explore Mountain or whatever the case may be. So I think a lot of people have that need and they don't even realize it. The other problem is that I think in a lot of churches we've separated. There's no embodiment when it comes to spirituality and faith. It's all like a head thing. And coming from the Presbyterian tradition, we're very heady. We really like our long and scholarly sermons and things of that sort. And that's one reason we don't have those as part of our gathering on Sunday afternoon. You can go find them on YouTube if you're interested. I do put something up every couple of weeks. I call it a reflection. But it's not part of that gathering because it that kind of encourages people to go back to just that headiness as opposed to having an embodied experience. And that's something that we try to do on Sunday afternoons then. So, but in order, I think also talking about the leading people down that path requires us to kind of have them reject a lot of the societal messages that we have about what makes for a good life, what makes for an abundant life. I had a point in my career years ago where I had the opportunity to go down a certain path and to take like a higher up management role. And I already made enough money, more than enough money to live, and that would have meant more money. And it kind of dawned on me, it's like, this path doesn't end. This way doesn't end. You reach a certain amount of income and you can provide for your needs, you can fund your retirement, you can send your kid to college, and then what? I mean, where does fulfillment lie down that path? I mean, you can take increasingly fancy vacations, or eat increasingly fancy foods, and yeah, it's nice to have those nice things once in a while, but I don't think fulfillment lies down that path. And so I kind of reached that point for myself. And I think showing other people, like, you can scroll all you want, but there's not an end of that scrolling where all of a sudden you're going to feel fulfilled, or you're going to have the same experience that you would if you got engaged in a service opportunity in Harrisburg and helped take care of the unhoused, or even just help pick up litter around, one of the neighborhoods in town, or whatever the case might be. I've found a lot of fulfillment in activism as well. You feel like you're a part of something, and it kind of pulls you into that community. And I think that's another thing. A need that people have is just a need for community that's just not being met.
Ooh, I love everything you said about that. And it's interesting because I was just editing a podcast this morning, actually, talking about fulfillment and it's a financial based podcast. So they were talking about money and buying all the houses and the cars and the clothes and things like that, and how none of that is fulfilling you. You can have all of it and still be broken. Mm-hmm. And I think that the need for people to become spiritually fulfilled has to come from, I don't want to use the word trauma, but it's usually some sort of an event or or something that happens in one's life that leads them to think, I have no other choice. So would you agree with that? Or is that just kind of like jumping off the deep end?
No, I think that can be the trigger for people where they do have some sort of realization. It's just like this, again, this path is not leading me toward where I want to be. But I don't know. I think our minds are just numbed to the point where we develop so much inertia, it's hard to change course from where we are. There's so many things calling to us to just sit on our couches and either look at our phones or stream something or stream something while looking at our phones, whatever the case may be. And
Yeah.
it's hard to overcome that. I don't know if you follow the Harrisburg subreddit, but there are so many people who write in, like one of the main threads on there, one of the common themes is people are moving to town. They want to know what there is to do. How do I become part of the community? And so many people write back and they're like, oh, I've lived here 5 years. There's nothing to do here. If you don't want to do Harrisburg Young Professionals, there's nothing else for you. And I do sympathize with a lot of those folks, but at the same time, nobody's going to come to your apartment or your house and drag you out and make you a part of a community. To some degree, you have to do that yourself. You have to go out and find it. And it can be very difficult, but there are opportunities there in Harrisburg. I mean, I look at where I grew up, 3 miles outside of a town of under 1,000 people. I mean, that I always tell people, it's like everything that's happened to me since then has been, relatively exciting compared to where I grew up. I mean, if you want to know what nothing to do looks like, spend the 1980s, near my hometown. We figured out ways of doing things, and you kind of do have to take that initiative yourself to get involved and find community. And but there are things out there.
Yeah, I would love to. And I think that is where the disconnect and where Mikee is saying, getting people to be interested in that and, and with your coaching, Mikee, and things like that, there's a disconnect between realizing that you need it and then actually taking action and seeking it out and coming to someone like you and saying, I am interested in this, guide me. So and that's with a lot of things too. There's that gap there in taking action. So here's a question. I actually just had a colleague of yours, I think, Kevin, by the name of Kelly Wyant, on my podcast recently. She was a joy. I absolutely loved her. And we had a great conversation about faith and what she's doing with the circle in Harrisburg. And one of the questions that I asked her was, and we had a really good conversation about this. Do you think that being involved in the Presbyterian denomination, that has helped you be successful in your endeavors? Do you think that you would be successful if you were involved in another denomination, I guess, for lack of a better term?
One of the challenges for me when I began seminary was that I was a Methodist at that time, and I had been a Methodist for decades. And before that, I was kind of a church mutt, going from, tradition to tradition when I was in college age. And when I went to seminary, I was pretty sure I didn't want to be a Methodist pastor, in part because of the way they're structured, and in part of because of the way they kind of shift their pastors from church to church every year or so. So I thought I was going to go into nonprofit work. And about that same time, we started to attend Market Square Presbyterian downtown in Harrisburg. And we actually went there for a concert. We didn't intend to visit. We were there for a concert, and I started to look at the materials in the backs of their pews. And one of the things I found was a little pamphlet for the community that Kelly ran out of Market Square at that time. It was called Awe. And I was like, this is really cool what they're doing here. And we went back the next day and visited, and we've been attending on Sunday mornings ever since. But I still had a lot of dated ideas about Presbyterianism in my mind, that it was linked tightly to Calvinism and, just kind of some 1950s era, honestly, like 1950s era ideas about what Presbyterianism was. And so at one point I met with the pastor, and he showed me, he's like, I realized there was a lot more space within Presbyterianism, and that it had really evolved over the past few decades to a space where I was comfortable becoming a part of that. And they are moving forward. Kelly and I are we were part of the same cohort group with our apprenticeship with an organization called 1001, and y'all covered that really well in her episode, which if people haven't listened to is a really good episode. So check that out. But we received so many great, training and coaching and grants and things of that sort, and the space within the Presbyterian Church, or PCUSA, the denomination. If I had not discovered 1001 and had this idea in my head about starting Intertwined, which came before I even knew 1001 existed, I don't know how I would have done it. It would have been so much harder. And I know some other denominations have programs for experimental or innovative types of ministries, but I don't know what that would have looked like. So I'm really grateful to be a part of PCUSA, to have the support that we do from the area churches and the national body, and they've just been great.
Oh, I love hearing that. I love that. Mikee, you've been quiet over there.
I am just taking it all in. This is, something that I truly believe is very important. And I don't feel like an expert. I feel like an expert in so many of our topics now. This is one where I'm just trying to absorb the information. That way, if somebody comes to me, if somebody's listening to this, podcast, if it's their first interaction with the EcoPreneur's Edge, that they are getting their full value and hopefully sparking that desire to find spiritual fulfillment. Because I know how much better my life has become once I have attached myself to, the divine, the higher power, God, Buddha, Allah. I'm not here to tell anyone, who or what to follow, but I do believe that we as human beings are divine creatures and that we need a divine connection to something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, I guess that brings me to, if somebody was completely removed from spirituality, and they're listening to this, or somehow find it on YouTube, what would you tell that newbie, that beginner, on their path in spirituality?
I would, again, I can't tell somebody that they have a need in their life if they don't feel that. But we have, speaking for Intertwined, we're very versatile in the ways that we offer for people to become involved. Some people come to us and they're mainly interested in the service opportunities that we participate in, and so we offer things for that. Some people just want to sit over coffee. We don't have a building by design. When we're not meeting in outdoor spaces, we meet in other public spaces. So I don't have a pastor's study, so I do coffee 3 mornings a week at area coffee shops, and we do what we call a Thursday interlude on every other Thursday evening at a brewery, a local brewery. And so people can just come and talk about whatever. Those are opportunities to do that. And so, again, there are no rules around it or anything, but if people just want to come and talk, I think everybody has a little bit of spark in them, a little, some sort of experience that they've had that they might call the divine. And so we're just open to any sort of conversation around that. We have our eco-justice efforts in which we are involved. You can go to the Intertwined website and there's a link to eco-justice, and that has links to other organizations in the area with whom we partner. I run an email list which has, it'll have, I send an email about every couple weeks. It'll have a couple things going on, the monthly green drinks gathering that we have in Harrisburg, or, if there's some sort of demonstration going on. And then it has 5 things in it, some curated links you can click to either sign a petition or write to your representative and say, hey, we shouldn't build this pipeline, or whatever the case may be. So people can get involved that way. And then we have our gatherings as well. Sometimes we do hikes in lieu of a gathering somewhere, and we'll go to Cove Mountain, we'll hike up to a high point, we'll do some sort of reading, we'll just kind of sit with that for a while, talk about it. So if any of those things sound appealing to people, it brings them into the community, and then, they meet other people who are in the community and maybe find more ways to become involved or expand, or just forming relationships that exist outside of the intertwined space. That would be how I'd answer that.
No, that's good, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think, just for me personally, I love the beach. Let's just say that I love the beach, I love the ocean, I love water, and whenever I go to the beach, it reminds me of how small I am and how much respect I have for the power of water, and I know that something created that. And, whether it be God or Buddha, Allah, whatever you believe in, a divine that created that power that is much larger than any of us. It can destruct and it can save. And that's the power that I have respect for. Tying that into the environmental aspect, even just leading in with that for somebody that absolutely just loves connecting with the outdoors, because the outdoors, the water, mountains, what have you, is a connection to something bigger than we are. So even leading with the hike and getting people involved in that community, once you get people there, there's room for expansion in people's minds, and they open up to the thought and the idea of going down a further spiritual path. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, if they detect that need in themselves, I think kind of the basic question is, do you believe in a prime mover or not? Do you believe everything happened by chance? Or do you believe there's some sort of prime mover behind everything? And for someone who says, I believe everything happened by chance, I'm not going to push back against that, because I think that's like the basic question. And I'm not going to tell them they're wrong. That's fine. And that's not what Intertwined is for. Intertwined is a place to have that conversation, but it's not a place for me to convince them that they need to believe in a prime mover, because if they don't, then they don't. And that's fine. That's not, I don't see much value in squabbling over that. But if somebody does believe in a prime mover, then you get into other conversations. Where did you come from? Where did you get that idea of a prime mover? If they grew up in a different country or a different region of the world, they might have a very different idea of what that prime mover is like. And again, I'm not interested in saying why somebody should deny the tradition in which they grew up to come over to mine, because a lot of what I go back to is doing the work. The work for justice that I feel called to do, I'm better able to do that with someone who, it happens with people from all sorts of different faith traditions, as opposed to someone who claims to share the same one I do, but isn't interested in having their life reflect that at all. To me, that's a lot more frustrating than someone who is from a different faith tradition, but is interested in racial justice or LGBTQ safety and rights, or eco justice, or whatever the case may be. Because I think you can follow. Yeah, I used that term earlier, Jesus followers. Throughout my life, I've known people who were Jesus followers who didn't go to church, who didn't ascribe to any particular faith tradition. And I'm interested in doing the work with Jesus followers, whether they know Jesus or care about Jesus or whatever the case may be. The work looks the same, and people who don't go to church do that work, and they're making, they're essentially loving their neighbor. To me, that's the most important piece, as opposed to what their faith statement is, or, how many stickers they have on their Sunday school attendance chart, or whatever the case might be.
Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned, I think what you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned that you don't have a building. And I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that tell me, yeah, they're a Christian or they are a Jesus follower, but they don't go to church because they don't believe that you need to be in a building with four walls, on a Sunday morning, with offerings and things like that, it's a lot more than just practicing that. And I think that your openness and willingness to hear other sides and other opinions and faiths and beliefs is a really good way to get people to understand what you're doing. And I just love that. So Kevin, tell us, where can people find you? How can they get involved? And all of the things. How can they connect with you?
Our website is a place to start, intertwinedfc.org. The FC stands for Faith Community, and you can find a lot of things from there. We're on many of the social media networks, Intertwined FC, across pretty much all of them that I can think of offhand. So some people engage, I post spiritual practices on Instagram Monday through Friday. And so some people just choose to participate from a distance. They'll listen to my reflections on YouTube. When they come out, they'll do those reflections. So people can check that out. They can The website describes these. Come to a coffee. Just come, we chat. It's not a big deal. There are no expectations around that. Sometimes we have a group of people. Sometimes it's just a one-on-one chat. So people can come to that. For people who work during the day, that's why we do the every other Thursday. We call it Thursday Interlude. Come have some free pizza, engage in conversation. I try to bring a topic, for us to discuss. What have you been watching, reading, whatever the case might be, or where are you buying your plastic-free toiletries, food, whatever the case might be, different topics to talk about, or come to one of our gatherings. For some people, the hikes are a good entry point because if they like hiking, hiking doesn't really matter if it's an intertwined hike or just something you go and do on your own. So, check out the website. If we offer a way to engage, then please do. Even if you just join the Intertwined Actions email list, and every couple of weeks you have those opportunities to ring up your representative or sign a petition, I think there's value in that. We have seen change come through just that collectivism that you can do with something as simple as that. But my email address is on there. People can reach out to me. Sometimes people just want to know if it's a safe place. And that is something that's very important to us. That's one reason our logo looks the way that it does. It's in part to show people where we're coming from, but it's also in part to show some people that it might not be a place for them. And what I mean by that is there are certain people who can make a community an unsafe place, an unsafe feeling place for certain folks. And there are plenty of churches out there that accommodate folks who have those feelings, but we choose to be on the safe side for more marginalized populations, basically. I hope that's a good way of explaining that. But
it is. It's a great way.
But a lot of times, people are just, do I need to believe a certain thing to come? Do I need to dress a certain way to come? Will I be safe there? I try to, no, there are no expectations about how you dress or what you believe. And it is a safe place, or as safe as I can make it within my power.
Oh, I love that, Kevin. And to anyone that's listening, before you comment on the subreddits and tell people that there is nothing to do in Harrisburg, I encourage you to think hard about that and think about the opportunities that you have to get into your community and keep yourself accountable and have conversations and treat people the way you really want to be treated, with kindness and fairness. And I really appreciate and commend you for what you're doing, especially intertwining the ecological aspects of what you're doing, and your work with climate change too, which I think we probably, when we're doing some brainstorming, Mikee, I think we want a whole subject on that for a future episode. So just be prepared to get a call back.
Okay. Yeah, I do a lot of work with some local organizations, so I'd be happy to speak on that as well. I present in like adult Sunday school classes in churches and other forums where I talk about personal choices that you can make to promote eco-justice, but also at some point, that idea of like a carbon footprint, that's something that BP came up with years ago in order to make us feel guilty about the way we live our lives. Really what we need is systemic change. And so when I do that presentation, I do talk about personal choices you can make, but also the system is the problem. Like say you don't want to buy yogurt in a plastic container. It's really hard. Like you have to make an effort to find a place that sells a yogurt that has the right ingredients in it, or whatever the case might be. They make it hard to be a good person, basically, or to be a person who doesn't do damage just by their way of living. And so that systemic change is so crucial. So that's part of my talk as well. And yeah, I'd love to talk about that, my work with Pennsylvania Action on Climate and other organizations.
I love that. Take that as a to be continued. So, Mikee, thank you for being here and, as always, being the most amazing guest co-host. And Kevin, thank you for taking the time to be with us today and sharing your knowledge and encouraging people everywhere to make change. So we love that. And of course, all of the information about how to connect with you will be in the show notes as well. So, Mikee, any last words?
I am just so looking forward to episode 2 with Kevin here and all the things that, we have opened a can of worms, I believe. And,
I think so too. That's why I said to be continued.
It's definitely
Kevin,
to be continued.
If you if you haven't done cliffhangers before in media or entertainment, I think you just left us with the perfect one. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome. Both of you, thank you so much for being here. To everyone listening or watching, if you are watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button to the channel, like the video, and if you're listening on your favorite audio platform, we would love a review. That's how we grow here at the What the Nell podcast, the EcoPreneur's Edge edition. And as always, I will catch you on the next one.
To learn more about how to tell your story, connect with Nell at enticingmedia.com. That's ENTICEING media.com. Thanks for listening to the What the Nell podcast.